the vast majority of Western pharma is doing licensing deals for Chinese molecules. And so they are very rapidly now climbing up that value chain. And their number one goal is not to be a supplier to us, but to replace us.
Good morning. We were going to start with embarrassing questions to lighten the room. Senator, who do you regret taking money from? Well, let's get into it. I think we should start with China. When we first started talking about this panel, we were discussing some of the opportunities ahead, and every conversation we had veered into the challenge ahead with China. Senator Young, we're hearing that China is 2 to 5 times faster than the U.S. in early clinical trial development in drugs, and roughly half the cost. The speed advantage is now dragging manufacturing, IP, and eventually the whole value chain in drug development and biotech to China. You chair the National Security Council on Emerging Biotech. In one of your recent reports, you said China's moving faster than we expected and the window to act is closing. While we're at risk at being out-manufactured, we're now being out-innovated. In your word, maybe you could kind of walk us through what the biggest takeaways are that you've seen in China's structural advantage and how it's playing out.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having this event. Hillam Dali, what a great institution this has become in fairly short order. So I want to thank all of those who helped put this on. And it's great to be here with these biotech experts. But I'll speak to the Commission's work. I chaired this Commission for the last couple of years, and we had a number of distinguished experts who were members of staff and fellow commissioners who worked in government, in the national security enterprise, and more specifically in biotech. And what we discovered as we look to optimize our biotech ecosystem in this country for national security purposes is that we've got a lot of work to do. The Chinese are gaining very quickly on a number of fronts, from biopharma to ag bioscience to industrial biotech. And they've made this a strategic priority for 2 decades now. They have indicated that biotech was something that would be part of their 5-year plans. They've worked their plan, and through their brute force economics of throwing bodies and resources at this problem set, they're now a near peer in our estimation, and some of this is in a classified form. We could get more detailed, but they've actually been able to exceed the U.S. in their potential for certain types of biotech applications. So it's not difficult to understand what they've done in this area, because they've run the same play in other areas. First, they steal IP, and now they're producing much of their own IP, so we mustn't underestimate their innovation enterprise. Then they scale, and they're very good at scaling with their domestic population, their export-oriented economy. And then they strangle. They've done it with critical minerals, and they aspire, it's quite clear, to have us over a barrel as it relates to key inputs in the biotech enterprise. So what do we need? At the highest level, we put forward 49 recommendations, but at the highest level, we need someone to own biotech in the White House and in our different departments, and we're getting there. And we need a strategic plan related to optimizing our biotech ecosystem on an ongoing basis. And we also need more literacy, more bioliteracy within government, because we find that very few members of Congress and people within our various agencies are conversant in biotech and knowledgeable of the different policy issues. So we've laid out a path to get there, but there's more than a measure of urgency, which is why I think it's great we're highlighting this issue today.
Let's double click on the innovation engine problem. Dr. Jackson, 10 years ago, China published half as many scientific journal papers as the United States. I believe last year, China published 50% more journal papers than the United States. Core research that is now leading the way in the world, not just following and copycatting and creating cost advantage. What's going on from a research perspective in China? How have they created this advantage? And where do we sit relative to China?
Yeah, well, clearly what we've seen is China very rapidly take the R&D lead in biotech, in biopharma. They've done this very concertedly by their sea turtles policy, which is attracting talent that has been trained in the U.S., other industrialized countries, to come back to China, taking the IP, taking companies and biotechs, relocating them in China, and funding it very, very strongly, billions of dollars into this industry. So they have a concerted investment there. And as the senator said, you know, we used to think of China as our supplier. They should do the manufacturing for us. They would manufacture the generics that are so low cost it wasn't worth manufacturing here. But what we're now seeing is that the vast majority of Western pharma is doing licensing deals for Chinese molecules. About 50% of all licensing deals came out of China. And so they are very rapidly now climbing up that value chain. And their number one goal is not to be a supplier to us, but to replace us. And you can talk to any Chinese biotech pharma CEO, they will tell you 2028 is the year that they start launching therapeutics, advanced therapeutics, cell and gene therapies. They will launch them independently and globally. And so we're really on our back foot here right now. And we can't just think about this as, you know, looking at the past, what do we want to shift there? You know, ARPA-H's job is to look ahead into the future. Where is the therapeutics industry going? We are going to an N of one kind of therapeutics industry where everyone's singular disease really is a rare disease in as much as it's personalized to them. And so we need to build that future right now.
And from a research perspective, I mean, Zach, you run a foundry incubator investment business. What's your view on what China is doing to create core research advantages? And then maybe you could also speak a little bit to some of the regulatory tactics that they plan to.
Yeah, I mean, the senator mentioned that biotech knowledge is like fairly esoteric, and I agree. I thought I would do 2 seconds of like, here's how biotech works, and a little bit of some scary statistics. So pharmaceutical companies, which is what we're used to seeing, right? Like Pfizer on the label, if you will. About 75% of pharma products that we use today are not actually discovered by pharma. They're licensed in. So 75% of pharma's products come from licensing deals of small companies. So if you want to think about like where a supply chain exists, the best thing to look at is what are they licensing? Because that's the future of medicine. The future of medicine is what pharma licenses. And Alicia mentioned 50% of drug licenses last year from pharma were Chinese molecules. In 2020, that was 0. So we went from 0% licensing in 2020 to half in 2025, and this year, from the data that we see, it's trending 40% higher. So we're going to be in a world in like 2-3 years where nearing 80% of new medicines, if you think of it from a supply chain standpoint, are actually coming from Chinese biotechs. These are no longer American biotechs developing these drugs. These are Chinese biotechs. And if you think about like supply chain takeovers and where this all goes, if you become the source of innovation, the pharma company that sits on the top is no longer the relevant party. This is not the hard part anymore. The innovation is the hard part. And the challenge we have is that in 2017, the Chinese essentially deregulated their entire clinical trial system. So Dave, to get to your point, effectively what they did is they said, we are no longer going to centrally supervise and monitor first-in-human clinical trials. They went from a system of regulatory oversight and safety and controls and ethics because they borrowed it from us, and they got rid of it. And they got rid of it right around about 9 years ago. And so what you can do in China today, and this is where the actual competitive advantage comes from, is I can go from a molecule to a human clinical trial overnight, and I can get a read on whether my molecule works in people, in human beings, at about 3 to 5x faster than you can do in in the US and Europe and Australia. It's not 30% faster. It's 3 to 5x faster. This is not a small number. In biotech world, if you think of like developing a drug that has peak sales of $1 billion a year, every day that trial is running is worth $3 million. So this is a massive, massive advantage. And now what we're seeing is not only Chinese biotechs using their system of faster trials, we're seeing US biotechs go to China to run our clinical trials. And as we do that, our ability to do any sort of early clinical research in the United States is going to go to 0. it's not just that we're losing development because we're moving it externally. We're losing capabilities here because they've got what I would think of as kind of like an unethical superhighway of human research. And the things they do, we would never do here.
Senator, is there legislative or executive action needed here, or do we run into a wall of biosafety and ethics rules that make it difficult for us to compete in parity because we have a different set of standards?
Well, there is legislative and executive action needed right now, and our report, which is available at biotech.senate.gov for those who are interested. It's an easy read. There's a U.S. Senator version that is more summary fashion to catch your interest. There are a lot of things that are already working their way through the process. There are constructive legislative ideas we have about, for example, ensuring that we establish a web of biodata. So the standard setting can be handled by NIST so that as we accrue more biological data, they'll all be consistent with certain AI standards that are needed to train our algorithms. The administration has established more cloud labs that will be helpful in making accessible the data that we collect. So things are happening administratively so that we don't have an unwieldy innovation ecosystem as it relates to biotech. But as it relates to approval of these biopharma innovations, we've got to up our game. FDA is, when you look at our various constellation of agencies here in D.C., FDA is a pretty darn competent agency, but there are opportunities within FDA to optimize their system and to expedite a lot of approvals, and I know they're working hard to make that happen. Australia, we haven't mentioned Australia yet, another country, in addition to China, that is outclassing us in many respects. So many of our innovators are going to Australia and China to introduce their innovative products. DoD has established a Biotech Center of Excellence, a management office, and it will report directly to Deputy Secretary Feinberg. These are the things that need to continue to happen administratively, and we need to make more investments. We recommended a collection of different recommendations through the report. They add up to an $18 billion investment. I told my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, which historically at least have been more fiscally sensitive, and they asked why we didn't invest more money. So we did everything we could to ensure that the private sector is leading the way and the federal government would only be focused on those areas that the private sector can handle. But we need to make these investments, and we need to do so in short order.
They're huge ROI. I mean, someone gave me a statistic that every 1 year extension in lifespan grows global GDP by $60 trillion. So, you know, the payback is there, certainly.
Yeah, and I would emphasize, and I'll just make this closing point until you move on to someone else, but I would emphasize, when people think of biotech, they naturally and appropriately think of, I think, biopharma, maybe ag bioscience. I think most Americans don't think of bioindustrial applications and the learned skill of biomanufacturing. It is the latter two areas, biomanufacturing and bioindustrial innovation, where we're really lagging behind in many areas. Those provide the most direct applications to our warfighters. The innovations in material science and energetics and other potential areas through the wonders of biotech. It's the same science. Right. We are entering, with the wonder of AI meeting biotech, this era in which increasingly biotech it's a field of design. It's a field of engineering where we can come up with really novel products, and we don't want to be left behind. To me, more than the economic coercion, the supply chain resiliency challenges associated with China taking over much of the biopharma sector, it's losing the innovation base for these other national security relevant applications.
Yeah, in my industry, ag, biotech, China has a regulatory body that provides approvals, and you need to get those approvals if you're going to sell anywhere in the world, because China's a big importer of food products. So China last year only approved 11 or 12 ag biotech products out of 100+ applications, they were all Chinese companies. They won't approve anyone else's. So they're leveraging their regulatory authority to create economic advantages for Chinese businesses, which I would argue should be a priority in trade negotiations. But that's my privilege for sitting here. I can say that. Maybe we can talk about the future. So, Alicia, let's talk about new modalities. So historically, biotech has been, started out, we had small molecules, then we got proteins or antibodies. What are the new modalities in biotech, and how does that change the playing field for how America can win going forward?
Yeah, so things we're most excited about are those advanced therapeutics like cell and gene therapies. And I think an important thing to know here is this has been proven scientifically at this point. We know that these techniques work. We know that they cure disease right at the core. This is incredible for everything from Alzheimer's all the way to rare diseases, especially pediatric rare diseases. Those new platforms are so exciting because they're platforms. And you could think about a world where you get the platform approved through the FDA, and then you tune it to each individual. And that puts us in a completely different paradigm, where we're not doing one drug, one disease, one IND or FDA approval. We're doing one platform, many diseases, one IND. And that's a very, very powerful way to break the kind of very slow pathway that we have today. The second thing that's so interesting about this is that for these therapies, you can't divorce the manufacturing from the product. The product actually is the manufacturing. The process is the product. And in that case, you don't talk even about reshoring. There's nothing to reshore in that industry. And if we make sure we grow that industry here, and we have the appropriate regulation, we have the ability to move to this N of one medicine, where we're not just doing broad generic drugs for everyone. Everyone's getting their own individualized therapy. We're going to the root cause. I think this is really the exciting future that we're going after. So we can try to prevent the problems of the past, but really it's how do we build that future? And my agency, I mean, we're the tip of the spear on this. We have the scale, we have the capital, we have the speed to really build this future, and so industry can build off of that.
That's great. Zach, do you agree? And let me ask you to extend it into AI. Talk about in silico drug discovery and how that's changing the game. And does the U.S. have an advantage, or are we kind of going to see China catch up there as well?
It's mostly bullshit. Like, the reality is, like, we're dealing with atoms, not bits. And in the world of atoms, AI, the training data isn't there. The underlying sophistication of like that make, test, iterate cycle is really expensive. I think the AI and biotech stuff is like the most overhyped area we could possibly be.
I'm going to disagree a little bit.
Yeah, no, I know. And then we'll see like what comes out. The good news is the system will figure this out, right? Like the system will figure out whether AI matters for drugs. The thing that I think we should be concerned about, and I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask, which is why does our FDA still incentivize all of this innovation to go to China for early clinical development? And I'm going to touch on this. There's one thing you should take away. It's not just that the Chinese have a faster human trial system by essentially deregulating and doing things with patients we would never allow. Our own FDA incentivizes you to do this because what you can do is you can go to China, you can run a first-in-human study, like a phase 1 or a phase 2 study in a Chinese population at a Chinese hospital. You get your result, and then you can take that result back to America and skip the line. Meaning, I don't have to redo that phase 1 and phase 2 in a Western nation. I can use my Chinese data to open a phase 3 study here and go for an approval. And so what you do by allowing that kind of like run to China, run really fast in a system we would never allow in America, and then come back to the United States, think about the incentive structure for a US biotech. You have to go to China. There is no alternative path because you've got competition on the other side who is racing ahead with infrastructure that you can't use. And the FDA sits here and goes, we're okay with this. We have like a trust but don't verify system. We don't inspect, we don't audit, we don't send inspectors to these clinical trial sites. We have no idea what's actually going on. And most of these are IITs in China, investigator-initiated trials. They're not even registered with the Chinese government. It is a true free-for-all.
But just going back to Alicia's point, with new modalities, N of one, cell and gene therapies that are custom tuned, if you approve the platform, does that change?
I just think like this cell and gene therapy stuff is super exciting science. It's very cool. The number of patients that are eligible for this stuff is very limited.
Right now. But we're thinking 15 years. And I'm going to push back on the AI and data here, which is there is a real opportunity here, and we're investing in it, which is at least being able to do that preclinical work up to potentially even phase 1 when you're doing the safety studies in silico. And that's going to save you 18 months and $20 to $25 million in capital. And I'm not telling you it's going to be here tomorrow, but I think that's like a huge place where AI can play.
I would tell you most serious biotech investors who look at preclinical data, meaning data before the human, so think like mouse, dog, monkey, won't believe the AI predictions until you validate it in an animal system, which to me means you still need the animals, which is then like,
no, that is our, because we have the ability to work with the FDA, like this is the incredible thing. So we bring FDA along with us. We co-develop these tools with them.
I'm saying something different, which is even if FDA accepts it, which would be awesome, the investment part, the financing for these companies is going to require the animal data.
I disagree.
Because we won't believe it.
No, I totally disagree.
This is the beauty. This is like why free market's amazing. It's like, we'll figure it out along the way.
Senator?
Not staged, not choreographed. Right? Yeah.
Who do you side with?
Oh my goodness! Why don't we take this backstage and do I have to decide now?
I would love to be wrong. To be clear, like it would be amazing to be wrong. I don't think I am, but we will see.
What are you optimistic about, Zach? I mean, let's go down the row. I want everyone here to feel how friggin' insane and crazy biotech is right now. There are discoveries happening almost at like an accelerating pace. We've not seen this before historically. New modalities coming to market, life extension, resolving most disease. I mean, we've got a pathway for nearly everything that humans worry about. I think it's a pretty exciting time in biotech. What are you most excited about? We go down the list.
The weight loss drugs, for sure. Because we're on the first generation of these weight loss drugs. We're going to see the double Gs, the triple Gs. Wait till people see these triple G drugs that come out. That muscle sparing, no GI side effects. You get the weight loss, but you keep your muscle. You don't feel like shit. You're not nauseous all the time. Like the pipeline is incredible. And I would use it actually as a counterpoint to the cell and gene therapy stuff, which is the biggest, best drugs we have nothing to do with cell and gene therapy. They're actually classic small molecules and antibodies that touch a very wide population. So we get excited about very cool science, but the reality is, from an impact perspective, the classic stuff works, and it works really, really well.
I'm very excited about biotech as a field of design, and just this week I introduced some legislation to try and implement one of the Commission's recommendations. We've called it America's Living Library Act, and the idea is to sequence every flora, fauna, you name it, every living non-human thing in our national parks and our public lands over a number of years. We dedicate some public resources to this, and ultimately, as so many people know, the genetic traits of these animals and plants can be used to improve other products and create new products that can improve human flourishing in the future. That really excites me.
That's great.
It's Lewis and Clark brought to the 21st century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alicia?
I'm going to say something completely different, which is the thing I'm most excited about is being able to engineer neocortical tissue that we can use to repair brains with, whether you've had a stroke or neurodegeneration, and we're now at that point.
Yeah. I'll go with epigenetic reprogramming, but a couple years away, according to Zach, but probably the most funded sector in biotech right now in terms of dollars, total dollars in.
Oh, it's super cool. I mean, it's like changing a cell back to what it used to be.
I mean, there was a paper published out of China last week where they put these reprogramming factors on skin cells and reduced the age of the skin cells by 30 years after 12 days of just light treatment of these proteins. So it's pretty incredible. We're at the early stages, but it seems like it's going to have many curative effects. Thank you all for joining me today. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
That was great.
Good job.
Thank you, Senator.